Centuries End by Enki Bilal and Pierre Christin. Centuries End it's a collection of two albums by this team, the Black Order Brigade and the Hunting Party. Now, Party. Now, a little context. Pierre Christin is the scripter and the writer of these stories, and he's famous for being the creator and writer with his wife. I think of Valerian and Laureline. You know that, and that's another comic. I haven't read it. I have seen some image of it, and Star Wars, like straight out, got some designs from there. Also, Enki Bilal, he's the one drawing in here, and he's famous in the 80s because of this comic, the Nicopol trilogy. Now, this is before the Nicopol trilogy, or before and in between. The Nicopol trilogy has 3 albums. The first one appeared between these two. This one is a work of Bilal made by himself, like scripting and drawing. Oh, also, he develops some style where, like the ones seen on this cover, where he draws and paints on the page itself, and there's not like another colorist. I think here he still has this style of drawing, and then someone colors the page, and not the one used on the cover, These are from the 80s, 1980 and 1983, and also these guys collaborated on 5 albums. The first three albums are collected on another collection by Titan Comics called Legends of Today, and that has the first 2 that I don't really remember names right now, but I hated them. They were the second one was better than the first one, but it was basically the same story they were telling. And the third one, The Town That Never Existed, has an interesting premise. It is worth reading, but I didn't like it. I recommend to read it if you like the premise. It is about a town where there's people who work then at the factory, and this factory is owned by a millionaire, and the millionaire dies, and his daughter inherits all the money, and she decides to give all the money to the town and use it to make it better and all that. And I won't tell what happened, but what happens after that. But it is a cool premise to see what happens. The genre will be like Utopia, like Brave New World. Yeah, I didn't really like it, the way it was told and how it uses the 46 pages of story. But sure, it is an interesting comic. Okay, so the 5 comics talk about, and the theme has to do with communism and socialism, but it's not like it is good or it is bad. It is like a progressive disenchantment with it, or disappoint. They are getting disappointed on these political tendencies. The first 2 stories that are basically the same for me, the 2 of them are like a fantasy, like a left fantasy. And they were rather stupid, at least to me. Really pretty basic, when people say, "Oh yes, this comics is adult," because it talk about politics from a left point of view, and the left people win, and it is that kind of comic, at least for me. These comics also have people from have communists as protagonists of the story, but that doesn't mean they are heroes. The themes that these two stories tell or try to convey is rather different, because for me it comes from a place of disappointment with the party or whatever, the ideology. Pardon my English, it's not my first language. But okay, now here's the context. These two albums are longer, are like 80 pages each. So first, the Black Order Brigade has to do with Spain, and this one has to do with Russia. So the first one has to do with the premise is this town, and in the beginning, Bilal draws nature and architecture really well, captures it really well. Also the clothing, like the shadows, the scratch he does here, the inking. Like the backs of these guys, for example. You need depth to it. Well, this town gets like raided by these guys, old guys called the Black Order Brigade, and the whole town is killed. And then this character, who is a journalist, Pritchard, I think, reads about what happened, and he talks to his editor, talks to everyone, because he then reveals that he knows the Black Order Brigade, like fascist from the Franco era, Francisco Franco in Spain, and that kind of dictator. And he was a communist, like a communist group that fought with them. So he feels this kind of urgency to we have to stop them. And then and everyone is like, they are some old guys. It was a little town, who cares? So he calls all his comrades, like everyone is old now, has some, they have some job. I will not tell you what kind of jobs they have, but they are rather important people on the countries they are living. So he wants to join the team back, and here they are like teaming up. And the story is basically that, these kind of old guys, communist old guys, want to catch these other fascist guys, right wing or whatever. And that's it. That's the plot, So for me, it is a thriller, a spy story. They go all over the world, well, all over Europe, really. And that's the premise. I won't tell you how it ends, but I will tell like what I think the point of the story is, because I have read comments of people thinking when reading this like it is a reminder that our battle with against the fascist never stops, and I didn't get that from this at all. Well, first, Bilal, great drawings. For example, this first scene, one of the team dies. Why? Cool. The snow on the tree, and this one also, like snow on this wood. So someone dies here because they are old. He has a heart attack and all that, And that's like the first. And here's the Sagrada Familia. Cool again. Then go all over the world. Then Europe, Spain, really Italy, maybe. Don't really remember that pretty well, but sure. Again, what happens here for me it is that characters begin to get disappointing on their search. Like the woman character is like at some point is like too annoyed by all this, like no one cares about this. Why should we? And she leaves. She leaves them the team, and everyone is like, oh, go, being like all the people and that. So basically, it's like all communists, all fascists, they are fighting each other, and no one cares because the world doesn't care about all people. So it's basically a story of people who were young once on a time, on a world that doesn't exist anymore. For example, they get to meet some communists, young communists, but the old ones called communists themselves, and and they interact with these young communists who call communists themselves, but they got some fights, verbal fights, because they don't really agree on a lot of stuff. So they keep calling themselves communists, but are not the same. So that's for me like the interesting part of the story, like this. And again, I'm showing this because for me it is a great drawing. But it is like that kind of tale, like getting all the world doesn't really care about you anymore. No one cares. So that's it. Basically, the Black Order Brigade, like the theme, 80-page story, great art on every single one of them. Great color also. Sometimes the color is not very good, but on this one it is. Now we have this one, which is the hunting party, and it has to do with this train going to some place in Russia. This guy is a translator. This guy is who I lost the word, but this guy tells this other guy about this guy who can talk, like you can see here. And here we have like flashbacks. They are colored in another way, in a different way. And this is like the protagonist, the guy who can talk. And we get to know him because everyone knows him. Everyone who is invited to this place, they will be going. And it is a hunting party, so they will be going hunting at some point on the forest. But everything from his past that's the story, basically, like getting to know this character. Who was he? His relationships with another of historical figures. And there's a twist, but I will not tell you what the twist is, obviously. But and that could be like revealing the genre. It is political comics, maybe grounded. But besides that, I don't want to really explain too much. I like really this technique of Bilal, like showing his mind going around on the past and these glitches on people. In the end, and the story, we get to know this character because everyone who is invited know him and they tell things about him, and that's how we get to know him, because he can talk. And sometimes there are contradictions and that kind of stuff. And that's it, and I don't want to really spoil in this one because it has a twist. And it is not in the end the twist, but it is at some point. And in the end, for this collection, we have an interview with them where they explain and they talk about the 5 albums they made, what they were trying to do with each of them, how are they feeling, that kind of stuff. But what I got from reading the first three and these other two, these one are the best ones. You can start here. Start here. It is a feeling of disappointment when the ideology of socialism, all that. That's what I get from this. And again, it is a recommendation if for not for anyone, but if you're a fan of Enki Bilal and you want to see him draw, you know him from sci-fi, and you want to see him draw like naturalistic landscapes, cars, people, like a more grounded story, go for it. Go for it. If you want to read comics because the premise I told you were rather like interesting, you will not be disappointed because it gives you what it promises. Sometimes in the books, and that happened to me on The Town That Never Existed. I like the premise, but the way it was told, the way it used its 46 pages, I didn't really like it. But on this one, I like the approach, and the premise are interesting, So if you're like me and found that interesting, you like the art style, sure, look for this coming because they are good comics. That's it. Recommend.